Hey, it's Mr. Shrum. Welcome back to a physiology lesson walkthrough. And today we're going to look at the urinary system and its functions. Well, I think everyone knows the primary function of the urinary system. It's to excrete metabolic waste. The urinary system is also responsible for the water and electrolyte salt balance within the body. Here are the structures of the urinary system. We're going to look at that individually. There are two bean-shaped kidneys, and they really do look like tiny little dried beans. These kidneys are intertwined with blood vessels to carry out the process of urine production. The kidneys also filter blood. There are two ureters in the body, one extending from each kidney. Ureters are hollow tubular organs about 10 inches long. The ureters transfer urine from the kidneys to the urinary bladder. There is one urinary bladder in the body, and it is a storage sac for urine. It is located posterior to the symphysis pubis and anterior to the rectum. So it's behind this symphysis pubis and in front of the rectum. The urethra is a tubular organ that sends urine from the urinary bladder to the outside of the body. The urethra of a female is about 1.5 inches long. The urethra of a male serves both the urinary and reproductive systems. It is about 8 inches long. Excretion is the process of eliminating waste from the body. The digestive system does aid in excretion by releasing feces, and these feces are composed primarily of undigested food, bacteria, and waste products from your liver. Other metabolic wastes include ammonia, and this is from the breakdown of protein. It's very toxic to the body, and it's converted to urea by the liver. Urea is produced by the liver from ammonia. It's then carried through the bloodstream to the kidneys for excretion. Creatinine, that's the end product of muscle metabolism. It's produced at a constant rate and excreted as urine. So this is all found in your urine. Besides the ammonia, it's converted to urea. Other excretory organs of the body include lungs, skin, and your liver. The lungs release CO2 and water. Water is the byproduct of cellular metabolism. Skin, sweat glands within the skin excrete perspiration. Perspiration is a solution of water, salt, and some urea. Although it is an excretory process, perspiration is primarily generated to cool the body. The liver excretes bile pigments, and these bile pigments are processed in the liver from the breakdown of hemoglobin in red blood cells. The most bile pigment is bilirubin. Bilirubin is processed in the liver and released as bile. Bile is stored in the gallbladder. Here is a picture of bilirubin. Urination, also known as micturition, I'll be honest, I've never heard it called that before. We'll stick with urination, is releasing urine from the urinary bladder. It's a response to involuntary, meaning you don't consciously control these nerve impulses to the spinal cord, which send a reflex nerve impulse back to the internal urethral sphincter located in the urinary bladder. So that is all involuntary, like your nerves are just sending impulses, and then all of a sudden you have this urge to urinate. Voluntary is when you can consciously control nerve impulses to the external urethral sphincter located in the urethra. So involuntary, internal, voluntary, external, urethral sphincter. The average capacity of the urinary bladder is 700 to 800 milliliters. At about 200 to 300 milliliters, stretch receptors send involuntary nerve impulses to the internal urethral sphincter. Voluntary control of the external urethral sphincter doesn't normally develop until 2 to 3 years of age. So that's why when babies are really young, they can't really control. Yeah, you guys get it. So when the bladder fills up, about a quarter of the way, you get these nerve impulses that, hey, it's maybe time to think about using the restroom. The urinary system is responsible for excreting metabolic waste through the process of urination. All right, so that's the end of that first lesson about the function. Now we're going to talk about urine formation. When you examine kidney tissue under the microscope, you can see that it is composed of tiny functional units called nephrons. And each kidney contains over 1 million of these functional structures. And there are structures within these nephrons, and those include these, and we'll look at each of those individually. The glomerulus is a ball of blood vessels, and its responsibility is to filter blood. The Bowman's capsule is a hollow cup-like structure, and it surrounds the glomerulus. And let's see.
Glomerulus is a ball of blood vessels.
Glomerulus.
Its responsibility is to filter blood. The Bowman's capsule is a hollow cup-like structure. It surrounds the glomerulus. The collecting duct.
Glomerulus. That's an interesting pronunciation. Okay, anyway, moving on. The collecting duct receives fluid from several distal convoluted tubules. And what that means is that a lot of these little tubes come into this duct and it collects them. The collecting ducts eventually release urine into the hollow renal sinus, as pictured here. Blood is transported through the peritubular capillary network that surrounds the renal tubules. The afferent arteriole brings blood to the glomerulus, and the efferent arteriole takes blood away from the glomerulus. And the formation of urine requires that liquids and dissolved solids move across the thin walls of the glomerulus and across the thin walls of the renal tubules. Urine is formed through several processes, namely glomerular filtration, tubular reabsorption, and tubular secretion. Glomerular filtration is the process of filtering the blood within the glomerulus. Blood is carried to the glomerulus through the afferent arteriole by the pressure from the beating heart. Liquids and small molecules filter through the thin walls of the glomerulus into the Bowman's capsule. Filterable blood components that pass through the walls of the glomerulus include water, nitrogenous wastes like urea and creatinine, nutrients like glucose and amino acids, and salts, sodium and chloride. Non-filterable blood components that remain in the glomerulus include white blood cells, red blood cells, platelets, and proteins. Because glomerulus filtration filters some essential components like water, nutrients, and salts, there is a process to reclaim these components. This is known as tubular reabsorption. There are two phases of tubular reabsorption: active and passive. Active reabsorption requires cellular energy and carrier molecules. It reclaims the following molecules as they pass through the tubules. Microvilli that line the tubules provide a larger surface area, which aids in the process. Reclaimed molecules include glucose, sodium, amino acids. There is a fixed number of carrier molecules. Therefore, there is also an upper limit of molecules that can be reabsorbed. And we call that the threshold. If the number of essential molecules exceed the threshold, then they will be lost in the urine because they really only need so much. For example, normally the concentration of glucose in the blood is less than the threshold. However, if plasma glucose levels exceed the threshold, then some glucose will escape or spill into the urine. Glucose in the urine is often seen in individuals with diabetes mellitus because they typically have high glucose levels, which is hyperglycemia. High glucose means then they expel the excess in their urine. The second phase of tubular reabsorption is known as passive because it does not require cellular energy or carrier molecules. Substances reclaimed during passive reabsorption include water and chloride. Water and chloride are passively reabsorbed as a result of sodium being actively reabsorbed. So when water enters the Bowman's capsule, it has the same concentration of salt and water as the surrounding plasma. When sodium is actively transported out of the tubules into the plasma, it causes this imbalance of salt and water concentration. So inside the tubules has an increased water concentration, and within the blood, there is a decreased water concentration. Water then passively diffuses across the tubular membrane through osmosis to establish equilibrium and water concentration. As a result, 99% of the water is reclaimed by the tubules. Chloride is passively reabsorbed because its negative electron charge is attracted to the positive charge on sodium. Tubular secretion allows for larger molecules to move from the peritubular capillary networks, the blood, into the renal tubules. This is so that additional waste can be added to the urine, such as creatinine and penicillin, ammonia, hydrogen ions. Tubular secretion is an active process that requires carrier molecules. Therefore, there is a threshold limiting the number of substances that may be excreted during this process. Urine is now formed and continues into the collecting duct and then to the renal sinus of the kidneys. The urine will then travel through the ureters into the urinary bladder. Finally, it will be eliminated from the body through the urethra. Urine is produced in the microscopic nephrons within the kidneys. It is formed through the following processes: glomerular filtration, tubular reabsorption, tubular secretion. And remember that reabsorption has both an active and a passive component. All right, I think we'll stop there for today, and then I'll get into the next two again later. But until next time, see you all later. Have a good one, guys, gals, and pals. Bye-bye.